It's the very basis of dualism, obedience to the master. Obedience to God is ever a servile position of service. Servile, service. You can't be like God. You are a complement to God, something that is of value to him, yes, but not him, you see? Whereas a love relationship is, you can be like the God that's loving. You can be loving too. In other words, you can be a child of God, like him, and becoming as wonderful as he is. And of course, because it's based on love, it is, if you like, by definition, the perfect harmony. So a religion that is dominated by service, obedience to the authority of God, well, first of all, it's not love. And secondly, you can never be one with God. You can only be some sort of complement to, a support, something in harmony with, but not as, not in any sense an equal. You're an inferior. You never experience the expansiveness of the eternal. But of course, a God of love wants you to be his equal. In harmony, of course. In love, in fact. But do you see it's the difference between being a servant or the child of? We are the children of God. The Jesus story has us calling him Father, Dad. You may say, well, that's authority. Yes, it is. But children grow up. And dads, mums and dads that love their kids want them to grow up fully and wonderfully as they are. Because that's what they value. Isn't that lovely? So our relationship to God is that he is all loving rather than he's all powerful. He is all powerful, but that's secondary to us. He's all loving, that's absolutely primary. And it's a non-dualistic trust in that way. In other words, it's not separateness, which of course you know, that's what love is. Whereas the servant role is very much separate. They have separate quarters and quite separate roles, and the servant never comes to be the master of the house. Except, interestingly enough, in something like Roman culture, 2,000 years ago, where Augustus was not the son of the previous emperor. It was relative, in fairness, but, he was adopted, so to speak, as the heir. Interesting, you see. Rome was civilized. Relative. It's all relative, isn't it? But relative to the nations around and that Rome dominated. Rome was very civilized in many ways. It was the largest city in the world. Well, at least the known world from the Roman point of view, anyway. not sure how big cities were in the East and so on. Understood to be one of the first that had a professional army. They were paid to be in the army, and when they'd served a certain period of service, they received a retirement of land and, a very good place in the citizenship of the society. I mean, assuming they survived that long, of course. It's an amazing civilization in that, from North Africa came the bread, part of their empire, and the citizens got free bread. How amazing. How's that for a welfare state in such early times? They had, of course, interesting technologies. They had concrete and, of course, glass. They weren't the first civilizations to have that, but they used it in a big way. They made roads, of course, to control their empire, but the best roads, they lasted right through the Middle Ages. We didn't build roads until, the transport revolution, which came before let's think now which way around. I can't remember now. I think the agricultural revolution was before the transport revolution. Yes, I think so. And we started building roads. And canals. Yes. Mind you, Egypt had canals. They had a canal running from the Red Sea towards the Nile. I don't think it actually linked. I don't think there were locks. But it basically meant you had a water route. You had to change ships, a bit of a transport problem just on the link, but structures and communications are major when it comes to civilization, cities, and water supply and sanitation. Major. When we get to something like, I don't know, is Angkor Wat something like 1300s, 1200 and something? As far as we know, there was no city bigger than that until you get to London in the 19th century, I think it is. And of course there the transport and water system turned on the astonishing use of the largest man-made reservoir ever made by man, as far as we know, and the waterways around the whole of the city, which would have provided both sanitation, fish, and water, of course, for the sort of 6-month dry season. An extraordinary city. Coming back to Rome, how fascinating you're welcome to practice your own religion, unless it was exclusive, and of course this was the objection to Judaism and Christianity, in that they were hostile. It was very dualistic, them and us. Whereas from a Roman point of view, provided you worship the emperor, you can worship whatever else you like, unless it interferes with other people worshipping. And of course Judaism and Christianity did, in its way. And as the history turned out, dramatically too. Well, every civilization has its problems. Ours seems to be coping with our technology. blessing and a problem to us. The same as our amazing ability, transport. It seems to be extremely good, but our mobility seems to have wrecked our family structure, and it's not clear what civilization is without a family structure. It's not clear at all that the human being can adapt to such. But it is very adaptable. And the question is whether it would survive relative to cultures that kept a family structure, really. Don't know. Jury's still out, isn't it? I do know from the scriptural point of view, of course. I mean, the Jesus story has it that you see dad as father, so it's a relationship, a family relationship. Now, whether that's because that's the only way or because that's the way that's most meaningful, given our experience of family-structured civilizations, I don't know. You could say the equality democratic drift was inevitably going to challenge family structures in the end, because they are authoritarian, aren't they? I mean, the parents are respected and revered, and they are the authority and have the power. And our societies are built like that. Royalty, the elite and so on had the power. And we object to that. What we ever wanted, of course, was leaders that were benevolent and wonderful. I mean, perhaps increasingly becoming myth, but the, again, was it 13th century or something? Ashoka, India, who became an incredibly benevolent, in that situation, Buddhist leader and king, emperor. Yes, and believe it or not, William the Conqueror, who should have been called really William the Great, once he had conquered, of course, and set up organization and power, I mean, he set the whole place up with parishes and cathedrals, and everyone had instituted the beginnings of the medieval system, which was in a sense a very peaceful structure of order, service, of course, very paternalistic in that sense. Yeah. And so his son, Henry the First, presumably. Well, we don't know much about him because his reign was extremely good. There was no news. News is bad news, and there wasn't much bad news during his reign. It was good going. Well, as far as we can see. Let me pause here a minute, go back to see what I started with in this recording. Oh yes, it is that, isn't it? It's the dualism to the master. And of course, if the boss, the dictator, the king, the emperor is not too enlightened, then he's more authoritarian, and we have a dualist situation. If he's a loving parent, as I understand loving parent from my mum, you don't have. She wanted to be my good friend, best friend, that I could always rely on. She was always there. It was a relationship of love, you see. And quite simply, that is the ideal, isn't it? Thank you, Dad. As the scripture has it, we love him because he first loved us. That's our ideal, isn't it? Thank you, Dad.